with another Community Solutions Minnesota radio podcast. I am Jason Bradley, the host of this ship for the day, and my partner, as always, Mr. Andrew Richter.
How's it going? Another day in paradise, talking about all the stuff that you need to know. What's going on? We got a big show. Big show. with what we're about to talk about, because I know no matter where the heck you live in Minnesota, or anywhere else for that matter, one of what we're talking about today is going to be done in your city this year, no question.
That is correct. We are talking about comprehensive plans. And why? Because it's that time of the decade.
That's right. The old year that ends in a 7 is the year that it's time to renew comprehensive plans for the city you happen to live in. And, of course, if you're in one of the 189 cities under Met Council jurisdiction, you're not really in control of your comprehensive plan at all, are we?
That is correct. You must submit one, and the Met Council gets the final say. We'll get into all that. If you live in outstate Minnesota, I would still tune in, because many of your cities do have a comprehensive plan. They're either required by the county, or there's the city just really wants to do one,
and there's some regional authority out there. Counties can enter into agreements with each other.
Yes.
You're going to see this. I'm sure they have one I know they have one in Rochester, because you and I have studied that, and Duluth, St. Cloud, any area like that is going to have a comprehensive plan for the next 10 years.
Exactly. And it's the way that they kind of control what goes on. So let's talk a little bit first then about what a comprehensive plan is and why we're bound to it.
Well, I think that there's about 5 big parts to a comprehensive plan. And it should be on your city's website. And it might be called something different. They don't all call it a comprehensive plan. It might be your 2020 plan or your master plan. There's different word games that cities like to play. But basically, it is a 10-year. The beginning of it will be a bunch of statistical data about populations, about trends, about household income, things like that, how many housing units they have. And then after that, there'll be 5 or so main parts, and that may vary depending on where you are. That's mostly transportation and transit, which are usually together.
Yes.
Even though they're not the same, but they're usually together. You will have things like land use, and we'll get into what that is. You will have housing. You'll have parks, you'll have water. And then in some other cities, you may have aviation, like Crystal does. You may even have a separate plan for bike and pedestrian things that may not be covered under transportation. Some people, some cities will just take roads. Some cities will specify on transit. And basically, it's a layout, A, of what you have, B, what you want or see in the future, and that will be all laid out. A good example is, maybe we can take them one by one. Take something like housing.
Okay.
If what they'll do is, when you open up the comprehensive plan, it'll have a map of your city, and all the residential areas will be filled in on said. I mean, I know Crystal does for sure, and I'm in Champlin, and they have the same. I've looked at theirs; they have the same thing, and basically, it will have an R. That's how it's zoned, residential, and it will have a 1, 2, or 3 next to it, and that signifies the density. So, and I can't remember which way it goes, but there's 3 classifications usually.
Right.
That's low, medium, and high. And it will show where it is. Then it will show a map in the future of where they think it will be.
Yes.
So it's kind of like a hybrid of then and now, if you will, or now and in the future, I guess I should say. And it may show past stuff too. I know Crystal's comprehensive plan shows data going back to 1970, when the baby boom was still going on, and you had more people per home, but you actually had less homes. So it's kind of strange. There were more people in a home. So that's something to see, and usually they'll also have a chart of how they define that, and usually it's like units per acre or something like that. But the housing aspect of it's very important, because what they want to change, or what they envision that will be changed, will all be done for a reason that'll become clearer later. So and I don't mean to leave a hook there, but I mean why the city would target something for, say, high density. I guarantee you there's a reason why they want to do that.
Yes.
And they do follow through on this stuff. Crystal is a great example. The Kavanaugh area that has been targeted by the city for 20 years.
Yes.
To put up high density housing there, and finally 3 or 4 years ago, or whenever the hell it was, doesn't matter. It went through as high density housing, and I, the school district technically owned the land, and they sold the land to the city. Well, why it's sold to the city, it still escapes me.
Right.
As to why it goes from one tax paying entity pays another one is kind of strange in my book.
Yeah, and that's a great example, the whole Kavanaugh development, because when they mean high-density housing, they don't just mean they're going to build an apartment building or put up some townhomes. So much of that, and we'll get into this in a future podcast about following Met Council projections, but so much of it has to be affordable housing or senior housing, because you have to have equality in the types of people that you're bringing in for the housing.
Yeah, and that's also where they play some word games. They also play it with how they define townhome developments are often classified today as medium density.
Yes.
You will not see that as high. New Hope's a great example of that. In fact, New Hope a couple of years ago actually changed how they defined high density. So some of their projects, instead of what used to be high density, is now medium density.
Right.
That's a good example. Like, I think what they're building over by the old Hosterman, south of Jimmy John's and I don't know what the heck is over there. There's a bunch of things there. They have that Winnetka Green on the east side of Winnetka, and on the other side, I believe that is classified as medium density, even though it is going to be pretty smushed together, and people aren't going to have much of a yard and things like that. But I think they get away with that being medium density. And I'll tell you what, affordable housing is something that I think really needs to be challenged by cities, whether the Met Council can come in and force a certain type of housing. I think senior housing is going up instead of like apartment buildings. I think cities that are resistant to the Met Council's demands or how they figure out affordable housing are putting up senior housing as a way to get around that, so that there isn't this 800-pound gorilla trying to force. And let's be honest about what it is. It's about getting minorities to move out of Minneapolis and St. Paul and into the suburbs. The Met Council has said out loud that they want that to happen. Well, they can't do it if they can't afford to live there. So part of the affordable housing mandate is to try to get minorities out of Little Mogadishu and Little Havana or whatever else is in Minneapolis, and forcing them on the rest of the cities, whether the residents want to live by apartment buildings or nobody cares. It's all about, Met Council stated one of their goals is racial equity, and in their mind, that is putting more, I don't know how to say it nicely, chocolate chips in a vanilla shake, and getting that out everywhere. And they have publicly stated that they're trying to do that.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with upward mobility and
not at all.
and people integrating. People are people. That's fantastic. That's what America is.
But I'm here to tell you that it's happened naturally.
Yes.
And it happened with white folks too. My mom grew up in Minneapolis.
Mm-hmm.
Her and my dad moved to the suburbs, the
Mm-hmm.
first ring suburbs, like everybody did in the 50s and 60s. And then their kids, my sister and I, have moved further away.
Right.
Okay. And that will happen with minorities too, if they get the opportunity and the education and a successful career. At some point, they're going to move up as well. But, putting somebody in a neighborhood that they can't afford really isn't doing anything for them. They've got to be somewhere where they can pay the bills. And, and that's also part of the justification of transit that now that we have poorer people in your neighborhood, we need to bring in transit and then there'll be all the developments around that and land use, which we'll get into. But there is an effort to pluck minorities and put them in certain places, which is just ridiculous.
It is. And I think in some instances it's not good for them either, because where maybe they could walk to work before or take a bicycle, which was within their means, now they're forced to take the bus or take the light rail. And we'll get into that in the transportation transit part of it, that they're trying to make that so that's available to people all over the metro because they want housing equality. And that's why these things will never pay for themselves, because they want to keep the fares where people are able to utilize them. Yeah.
There and there is an economic reaction. You make something that's $1.25, $6, and you're gonna have resistance there. But it's such an abuse of power because housing is a commodity. Nobody forces you to live anywhere, and we have the same people complaining about mortgage meltdowns, complaining about banks and loans, but they're the same people manipulating the housing prices just as much as banks and interest rates have done so. It's the same people doing the same thing. And I'll tell you what, it ties in with land use, because housing and land use kind of tie together. Land use will cover everything.
Yeah.
Commercial property, industrial property, public property. You'll see that. And again, you'll have a map in your comprehensive plan that has land use in the year 1980, land use in 2010, land use in what we envision in 2040. And that's where you'll see your C territories, which is commercial. You'll see if your city has any industrial areas. You'll see parks. You will see land owned by the public, be that, schools, be it city hall, be it community center, be it whatever the heck it is. You will see all of that as well. And what they'll do is when they talk about the future, they will identify land use areas.
Right.
And talk about if redevelopment were to occur, of course, with no government manipulation, of course.
Right.
Yeah. If land use were to occur, what do we want to put there? And they will use that as to me, a comprehensive plan is a tool. It's not a Bible. But they will, if something becomes available, now I'm using air quotes here on the radio, but if it becomes available, however it becomes, look for your city. That's where they use tax increment financing. Your city will be neck deep in deficit. It's a deficit spending. Let's call it what it is.
Right.
And of trying to manipulate that land into what they want to see in the comprehensive plan.
Exactly. And you bring up a good point. I want to say this because a lot of our detractors will come and I know what they've said in the past. They'll say it again. You guys are anarchists. You want to burn everything down. You want to destroy government. We're none of those things.
I don't know any former mayors who say that.
I am a planner at heart. I write lists. I'm that kind of guy. I think a comprehensive plan is a good thing. And I just wrote a blog about this on our site. I think that to plan for the future, to know where you're at, know where you're going, to plan for emergencies, it helps your city run well. That's great. But none of this is naturally occurring. This is all manipulated. This is all created by the Met Council, by the American Planning Association, by these groups that have set these standards, and then the cities fill in the blank like Mad Libs, like we've talked about before, to try and achieve preset goals, not caring one bit what your city looks like, what kind of natural resources it has, what kinds of topography it has, and it really doesn't matter. It's what I call the belly button principle. Everybody's got one, and so everybody's got to have mixed use development. Everybody's got to have high density housing. Everybody's got to have accessibility to transit. Everybody's got to have bike paths. And the list just goes on and on. Yeah. And it's crazy because we look at like a city like Independence, we looked at their comprehensive plan once. And
now I have to ask, are they in Wright County?
No, they're in Hennepin, but are they in Hennepin? They're technically not in the Met Council's taxing district, but they're part of the Met Council's area.
I see. So the Met Council has authority over them, but they don't have to pay the Met Council.
And I think part of that is because I don't think that they have a sewer system.
They're on well water out there?
I think they're on well water, like Deep Haven is, and a lot of places out that way. But looking through their plan, you go to the housing portion of it, and it says right in there they currently have 0 units of high-density housing, but they were expected to create, I don't remember the number, it was like 64 or 84. Yeah, it wasn't a high number, but for a small community like that is kind of a high number. And so you move out to Independence because you want independence. Right. You know what I mean? And so if you create these high density housing units, then how are people going to get to work? If you have this housing equality, we're going to have to start servicing you with either trains or buses, or make them close enough that you can get to them, and then
within a half a mile.
Yeah, and all of a sudden you find yourself in the Met Council's taxing district, and they're making more money.
And then all of a sudden it's more and it's more and it's more. And you know what's also interesting is how you never really get an explanation of why they want something. Right. Which is also kind of strange. It's like, well, we'd like to have one of the things in Crystals is that they had a goal to have 75% home ownership and 25% renting. And their line in there is, well, we're not there yet. And it's like, wait a second. So you're telling me that you want this, and I've seen this 75-25 mix before. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not something that's limited to Crystal, but you're not there yet. Well, what does that tell us? It tells us you're trying to do it. It tells us you're trying to create the circumstances instead of letting it happen. You know, like, I'll give you an example. And I'm going to pull it back to land use for a second. There's nothing wrong with saying, you know, like look in a city like Crystal, like the area like where Thriftway is.
Yes.
Okay, you've got a defunct business and an empty area. Now, there's nothing wrong with the city coming and saying, you know, that area there, we need to do something with.
Right.
I mean, that's, I think when you talk about us being anarchists and conspiracy theorists and all that, I am not opposed to that. What I'm opposed to is limiting it to one thing and trying to create the circumstances in which this one thing happens. Like what the city wants there is high-density housing. I'm not sure the current, under the last comprehensive plan, the people who did that.
Right.
That's what they wanted there. And, you know, what if a business comes in and wants to tear that building down or whatever and make another business? They can say, the city, well, that doesn't line up with our comprehensive plan.
Right.
So there's a danger, I think, in saying, there's nothing wrong with saying, okay, or a city that maybe has open land. Like if you're down in Lakeville or you're out in Otsego or somewhere and you've got a quarter of the city is undeveloped.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'd like to, this area is something that we'd like to develop in the next 10 years. What that is something different than, yes, we think this is a spot that something could happen. They're not letting the private sector do that. It's being manipulated. And you got these companies that are getting in bed with the cities through private-public partnerships, which is really dangerous. And that is how land use and housing get manipulated.
Oh, as a whole target area up in Brooklyn Park. I mean, that is because of how their comprehensive plan and working the transit, the rail into there. And let's talk about that a bit, because you'd mentioned earlier transportation and transit are different. Transportation is how people get around. Transit is public transportation.
Absolutely. And they are different. And I'm going to tell you, you'll read about roads and it's mind-numbing. Because of how roads, there's a lot of classifications to roads. And the funding is so intertwined. I mean, it's so screwed up. I mean, in a perfect world, and you and I have talked about this for the last 10 years, but in a perfect world, the federal, take Crystal. Okay, we don't have any interstates in Crystal. We have one state highway, which is Highway 100. We have county roads. We have municipal roads. We have what are called MSA roads, which is another mix of state and it's called municipal state aid. But typically, you'd want the interstates to be paid for by the federal government, the state highways to be paid for by the state government, county roads, and municipal roads. And I can tell you, not only is it not even close to that, it's something foreign how we pay for this.
Right.
There's so many government entities from MnDOT to, you name it, Met Council too, that are involved in roads and who funds them and who designates them. And there's other types of road. Highway 55, which is not in Crystal, but it's in Golden Valley. It's called a trunk highway.
Right.
And there's a different way that's classified, and there's like a max the speed limit can be, and somebody can go lower, but they can't go above. And it is as screwed up as you could possibly say.
Right, and it happens with even roads, with city roads, municipal roads as well, because they're forced to classify them a lot of times by being residential or arterial, or and that changes how, especially when you're redeveloping. Sometimes you can drive in, the way classically you would design a city. You can drive in one side of the neighborhood, drive out the other side of the neighborhood at some point. And a lot of times with the new development, it's like a lot of these housing developments you see where you drive in one way and you might as well be blindfolded, spun around in a circle 10 times. You can't find your way out of it.
Labyrinth planning, I think they call it.
Exactly. And it is all about trying to get the most out of your land use, trying to compact and reduce the lot sizes so that you can squeeze more people in, trying to make it so people don't want to drive a long ways and they go to the businesses that are right around them.
It's to make driving such a pain in the butt that you drive as little as possible. There's, if you read Crystals, they talk about making streets narrower. I remember that being a part of it. They want to reduce the width of streets. And it is, you're right, it is about making driving a total pain in the rear. And again, it's all about manipulating how we travel, manipulating where we go, manipulating how many trips we take. And all this stuff, I'm telling you, this stuff will be, and they'll target areas to build roundabouts. They'll target areas where they don't want to allow parking. Like one of the reasons to make roads narrower, especially in those townhousey kind of neighborhoods, is so they can limit your ability to park. on a street.
Uh-huh.
So that's, that's another thing they're trying to do. They're just trying to make driving impossible. And, your comprehensive plan will have that. They all have a transit angle. They'll show bus routes and things like that on their future transit plans, whatever the heck they are. And they'll also have, and this may be separate, but they will have a biking and walking. Some have more on that than they have on anything else.
That's true. And I remember reading through Hutchinson's, and it was like, we are so proud of the number of parks we have. It's like second to none, but we need more. Because we don't have enough parks for the number of people that we have, and we need to connect these parks with greenways so that people can do a tour of the parks.
Yeah, they can take their ATV and go out to Wilmer. Well, and here's the thing too, and I don't want to sound like I don't like parks. I mean, everybody does, and there's a certain amount of space that can be put aside for parks. But remember, every park that you build is a double negative when it comes to your taxes.
Right.
And let me explain that. It is money taken off of the tax rolls. So that land is not generating revenue for the city, the county, the school district, whoever else. And again, land isn't there to finance government. I'm not saying it should be. But keep in mind, then that money, you have to maintain the parks. Mm-hmm. You have to, put new stuff. Some cities have golf courses, and things like that. And then you have to maintain this land that is not revenue generating, so that all of the extra money that's not coming from that is now put on the burden of everybody else. So if your city is 1/20th parks and you make it 1/10, that 10%. That 1/10 to 1/20th is now on your back because that land's not generating revenue anymore. And, you take a city like Crystal, I think there's 26 parks.
That's about right, yeah.
Something like that. I mean, we're a city 6 square miles. 26 parks. It's,
I tell you, I go to the one down here, a few blocks down from the house sometimes. There's nobody there. If there is, there's never more than 5 people there. I mean, is that really the goal of a park, is to be alone in the park? Everybody gets their own. That's where we're headed.
We are like that, because if you go to somebody and you say, look, we're going to need to reduce the amount of parks, they may agree with you generally speaking, but they don't want the one down by their house gone.
Right.
And especially if you put high density, boy, not a chance. I mean, they'll go lay down on that one. All of a sudden, they'll be park goers if something like that happens. And I think, a conversation has to happen about how much, and I'll bump this up to like the park district. How much park space do we need? And how many paths do we need? And how many, not want, need? Mm-hmm. And that never seems to be the conversation. It's not the conversation at the city level either. It's, city, Crystal, New Hope has 0.4 miles more than we do. So.
Right. And I'll tell you, right where we sit right here, I mean, we've got 3 parks within walking distance. One's a little bit of a stretch compared to the other 2, but it's not bad. I mean, we've got the one that is just east of here, 4
Welcome
blocks?
Avenue or something?
And then we've got the one that's just on the other side of Highway 81 with the amphitheater, and then we've got the one that's on the north side of the airport.
And you also have Twin Oak by the VFW.
Oh yeah,
that too. You got 4.
That's right. We got 4, and yeah, Twin Oak is actually really close to here too. I mean, and that one I can almost throw a ball from Twin Oak to North Bass Lake Park. I mean, it's ridiculous.
It's a par 3 at the most.
It is, and that's not an exaggeration.
No, not at all.
So yeah, I mean, we've got this stuff that gets handed down to us in the parks and in housing. And I don't know if we covered everything in housing, but it is about making houses more compact. It's about being able to be a little more fluid with the way that you zone, where you can easily make something more commercial or industrial. It's about being able to have higher density. Mixed use is a term that you will see a lot that pop up in these, where they want to have high density housing over shops.
I was just in St. Louis Park today.
Yeah.
And what did I see? St. Louis
all
Park,
over the
it's
place.
everywhere.
If you go up and down
my
Excelsior,
God.
that's all it is.
It's incredible. It's all it is. And you can't drive back there. The streets are extremely narrow. It is, the whole character of an area is gone. And I think that's another thing, too, about cities doing their own thing is, it's like no city can have an identity anymore.
Right.
It's like that's being taken away. And I think a good conversation of, what is regional planning? Why is a city's, mixed use development any of the Met Council's business?
Right.
What does that have to do with planning regionally? Which is, remember, that was what they were originally tasked with, and actually they were tasked with one thing: water and sewer.
Right.
Which, again, it also to me has been a net negative because you've taken away the ability of cities and citizens not to be on the government system. I mean, you've taken away our freedom of choice.
Right. And if you want to talk about regional planning, and I'm not a fan of it at all, but where it might actually have some use in this area, how do you get traffic up and down the Mississippi River? Maybe further north with all of the mines, how do you get the shipment of iron ore in and out with the railroads and
same thing with like the pipelines they're talking about.
Right.
And I think there are other things too. Like the completion of 610 was a good example of something that really was going to take multiple cities and I think multiple counties too, because I think it went into Ramsey County. But they can form those partnerships.
Exactly. It should be 4 cities with an arbiter rather than the Met Council saying, here's how you do it.
Yeah, and MnDOT and everybody else who sticks their nose in. And alternatives to regional planning are things that they're going to be big subjects, I'm sure, on future shows. And these issues aren't going away.
No.
If you see what happened with Southwest Light Rail last year, and the manipulation from the County Transit Improvement Board and the Met, which looks like it might be going away, and of course I don't think the tax will go away. And you look at the Met Council and those entities that circumvented the legislative process. The issues of this aren't going away. And I'm telling you, your city is going to have to deal with the Met Council. And I want to explain just a little bit, Jay, about how they're going to write a comprehensive plan, because I think we should touch on that.
We should, yes.
Now that we've talked about what's in it. The other thing is that they will put together, your city will put together, most cities will anyway, a task force to, and again I'm using air quotes, to write the next comprehensive plan. Now, you can tell that it's not done by citizens because of the wording and the language. 80% of it's probably written already. But usually that will entail, I'll use Crystals as an example, all the members of the Planning Commission, which is, again, is why it's so important to get citizens to serve on that commission.
Absolutely.
Be city staff, probably somebody, 2 or 3 people from the park board, your Park and Recreations Commission. Council members like to appoint themselves to these things as well. City staff will probably include your city planner, your community development director, maybe your finance geek, because they may, that's where you'll see things like TIF recommended. And obviously that's not coming from a citizen. They're not going to do that. And things, I believe when Crystal did, I think there were 27 people on it. Wow. And of course, and there were dissents on there. The comments were very, very negative. There was a very negative reaction by the citizens, especially with the amount of high-density housing planning. But those task force will probably be put together I would say by springtime.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe they have to have at least the rough draft or the first draft or whatever you want to call it submitted to the Met Council by December 31st at the end of this year, I think. And they can make changes to it, I think, after that. But I think they have to have a preliminary report done by the end of the year. So it's very timely
Absolutely.
in what we're talking about.
Wow. So as that goes then through that task force, then the planning commission at the end of that has to approve it, right? And then they present it to the city council, who then has to go through it, approve it before they send it to the Met Council.
I think so.
Yeah.
Being that the planning commission is on the task force usually, that's usually a routine matter.
Right.
And of course, they're just advisors. I mean, the planning commission just advises on what to do. They may pass it with some comments
Mm-hmm.
and things that red flags to them. And usually what's passed by a commission is pretty much rubber stamped by a council.
Right.
It's not often that there's much discussion. So the time to get involved is now. The time to get on this is not when the thing is over. And that's another way they manipulate this, is they take comments at the end,
Well,
not
they
at the
always do.
beginning. Yeah. It's
Mhm.
what would you like to see in your city, instead of being told what you want to see later.
Mhm.
But that's typically, that's government. That's how it's done. Somebody makes the plans, and the Met Council, they're masters at making plans first and then trying to sell the plans to citizens.
Mhm.
So, but that's big, and I believe they do take citizens at large too on this sometimes, maybe not very many, but, if you're already in on a commission, this is something you got to get on. You got to get on this.
Absolutely. Because, like we said, after the city council goes and votes on it, then it goes to the Met Council. Met Council goes over it. Yes, it does line up with our regional plan, or no, it doesn't. They either approve it because it does, or they send it back to the city because it doesn't. And then if they send it back to the city has to rework it, send it back in, and so on and so forth, till the Met Council either is happy with it, decides to fine the city, or other punitive measures to force the city to come in line with the regional plan.
Yeah, and they do that sometimes really slyly, like deny grant money or something like
Mhm.
that. I mean, I don't know how much punitive they do, but they absolutely will force things on without a doubt. I know the Met Council forced changes in Crystal's the last go around. And, here's the thing. The Met Council is wrong all the time.
All the time.
Their projections stink. They're terrible at this. And it's the same idiots who are doing this every time. It's like, you guys couldn't be right. If they played basketball, they couldn't win an inter-squad game. I mean, that's just how wrong they are. So it's very frustrating, and it's not talked about or written about much. But that's a changing.
Yes.
Okay, that's a changing right now, because we're going to be on these comprehensive plans on where they are, where they're going. You and I are going to have an ear to a lot of these now that we didn't have 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to, and on a future show, my friends, we're going to show you how these are all being intertwined in
Absolutely.
detail. You're going to see the same language. You're going to see the same goals.
Let's hope that you're not. Let's hope that when we get to the end of this year and we see what's being submitted, it's a pleasant surprise. It's like, oh, look what Hugo put in their comprehensive plan. Wow. Wow.
Well, let's hope we see that.
Rather than
you're more optimistic than I am. But
I didn't say I was optimistic. I'm just trying to lay the seeds right now to get people thinking about it, because it is that important. And if one city stands up to the Met Council and says, no, we're doing this because it's best for our city, not what you're telling us to do, they can, like we say, go through a process of punitive actions. They can get drug into court. They can all of this. But if you have a number of cities that bind together and say no, I think that carries far more weight. And I think in the future, you can see the cities get some of their power back and keep the character of their city intact.
Well, I hope so. I think some people just, maybe give up the fight too easy. And I will say it's another issue. Where is our legislature?
Mm-hmm.
Where are these people? Where are all these people who talk about local control? And it's usually election year BS, and it needs to stop being that. I hear all the time about so-and-so doesn't like this, that the Met Council. It's like, well, who's cutting the Met Council the checks?
Exactly.
Who's letting these appointments be made, and who wrote the laws in the 70s and 90s that expand this power? The laws can be changed.
Yeah. Who either didn't go through the convention process or did and sent the same person back to St. Paul that refuses to pass legislation to restrict the powers of the Met Council.
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother show that we need to do before caucus time again, I think. That,
no doubt. That's on the agenda,
oh,
too.
boy. All right. Well, as you see, this is a bottomless pit that we could talk about for hours. This is a good introduction, I think, to comprehensive plans, and to get the wheels turning a little bit, to get you thinking about what you can do about them, because that's really where it lies. It's what you can do about it. And so, again, if you have questions, if you have things that you see in your community, we want to know about those things. And hey, we'll talk about those in these podcasts. If you see that there's crazy stuff going on and we can validate it and all that, we'll do some research and we'll talk about that, because it's good for everybody to know, because it's happening everywhere. So if you have anything that you want to send us, you can send us an email with 2 M's, comsolutionsmn@gmail.com. Our website with our blog is also with 2 M's, comsolutionsmn.com. You have anything else, Andrew, before we let these fine people go?
No, I just wanted to say that I did the whole show in sunglasses. I'm doing my WKRP Johnny Fever.
Is that what
today.
it is?
Yeah, that's what it is. It's
I
just
thought you were
something new.
Yeah, psyched up for fishing season
Well,
already.
maybe. I was going to maybe sing some Roy Orbison, but I guess I won't.
Oh, boy. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, so much for joining us for another Community Solutions Minnesota radio podcast. And we will be back very soon with yet another one. So hang in there, send us your questions, and we will see you very soon.
And always remember these great words. A friend in need is a pest. See you later.
Bye.